Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdog's Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, we're going to be looking at an account with a troll and a Glimmerman, folks. So turn your ears to these stories, and let's have some fun by reading the first story we have up here, folks, titled, Grinning Troll-Like Humanoid Appears in Bedroom Doorway near Brandon, Florida, and read exactly what the experiencer saw one night, folks. This unsettling childhood encounter took place in Pasco County, Florida, near Brandon during what would have been an ordinary evening with family. Instead, the witness turned to find a bizarre, flesh-colored humanoid standing silently in a bedroom doorway, smiling and watching. The brief duration of the event only deepens the mystery, especially given that the witness never forgot the face, the eyes, or the fear. Let's get into the actual account now. When I was younger, I had an encounter with some kind of creature that still I cannot explain. This happened in Pasco County, Florida, near Brandon. I have tried to make sense of it over the years, but I still don't know what it was. The closest comparison I can give is that it looked somewhat like one of those old troll dolls they used to make, but there was nothing harmless or amusing about it. The feeling it gave me was far darker, more like that of a troll or a demonic being. So he basically seemingly encountered an actual demonic entity here, folks, or an actual entity from a classic mythological story, folks, an actual troll perhaps, or maybe a goblin. Let's read on. I was getting ready to go out to dinner or somewhere with my family. My parents had already walked out of the house and into the garage. I went back into my room to get something in. When I turned around, it was standing there in the doorway. It was about 5 feet tall, not extremely tall, but not particularly short either. It stood there for a few seconds, smiling at me. I remember the expression very clearly. Its lips seemed to cover its teeth, so it was not snarling or showing them. It was more like a strange grin, and that somehow made it even more disturbing. It had big round eyes that stared directly at me, and for those few seconds I was completely frozen, because our witness here had no idea what it really was, folks. And to him, it looked like a troll, or maybe this was a form this entity took, folks. Then again, this could actually be an encounter with an ultra-terrestrial, the so-called truth behind the fairy and, well, elf lore that people basically think is just fairy tales. But that is something we can discuss a little more later, folks, after we finish this article. The face is what has stayed with me the most. I remember its nostrils fluttering slightly, which made it feel physical and alive. I would not describe it as reptilian. Its skin had a flesh-colored tone, kind of tan, almost like the old troll dolls, but still close enough to normal skin color to make it even more unsettling. It looked bizarre, but it also looked real. I looked away for just a second. When I looked back, it was gone. I'm not surprised about that tidbit in the story, folks. At that time, I had no idea what to do. I was terrified, but I never told my parents. Even then, I felt like nobody would believe me if I said I had just seen some strange creature standing in my doorway. I knew how people react to stories like that, and I kept it to myself. Nothing like it has ever happened again, but that moment has stayed with me ever since. It lasted a few seconds, but it was one of the most frightening experiences of my life. T. Did T actually see this entity, folks? Could it be that, well, he got the feeling that it was reptilian, or basically the idea came to his mind, folks? Maybe on some level this entity was influencing his mind in what he was saying, folks. Maybe this was actually some sort of reptilian being, and for whatever reason it decided to show itself, or maybe it was forced to show itself. Maybe it was weak or tired at that point, but it still had enough power to cloud T's perceptions here, folks, basically presenting itself as this, well, elfish, or I guess troll-like entity, folks, or let's just call him a dwarf. I mean, if you basically look at it like this, folks, actual human dwarfism, if you're a man and you're 5 feet tall, you're a dwarf. So maybe we could call him that. Either way, it does sound somewhat reminiscent. Either way, let's move on to the next article titled, Brief Glimmerman Encounters Reported. Are these cloaked entities manifesting in different forms? Indeed, folks, let's read the first story here, folks. We're not going to read the entirety of this article, just one story from it. I'll save the rest of those stories for another video later on. But let's continue. 4 separate witnesses from very different places and time periods describe encounters with what many now call the Glimmerman phenomena. These accounts range from a silent Iowa woodland to a North Carolina tree line to a dimly lit Australian bedroom to a deserted Road at Edwards Air Force Base, and each report describes a being that seemed partially concealed, distorted, or somehow not fully visible. What makes these testimonies stand out is not just the entity's unusual appearance, but also the recurring pattern of dread, stillness, and sudden flight. The details vary, but the emotional responses is strikingly consistent, raising the broader question of whether witnesses are observing a single phenomena in multiple forms. That could be the case, folks. I've seen various articles over the years describing various kinds of cryptids, and in these accounts, either there be Bigfoot or another, sometimes the accounts don't line up because sometimes there are differences. That could be the same with Glimmerman. But let's read further into this particular story now, folks, and hear the entirety of it. Reports of cloaked or nearly invisible humanoid beings continue to surface from widely separated locations, and the descriptions do not always match the cinematic, pixelated effect people often associate with the term Glimmerman. In fact, witnesses have described several variations, including shimmering forms, black mirage-like silhouettes, translucent masses, and vaguely humanoid distortions that appear to watch, stalk, or move with startling speed. One witness recalled an unsettling experience while turkey hunting in Iowa during the early 2000s. As an experienced hunter, he was well acquainted with the normal sounds of the woods and how wildlife responds when a predator enters the area. Turkey hunting requires long stretches of stillness, total camouflage, and intense awareness of every movement and sound in the environment. On this occasion, after sitting for hours listening to the natural rhythm of the forest, everything suddenly went quiet. Which is the same phenomena we see in almost every story we've read through, basically on various sites, folks, where there is suddenly just no noise, as if there's a predator in the woods and all prey animals, all insects, just go quiet. Is this what our witness experienced here, folks? Do you feel like he was in the presence of something predatory? Let's read on. The witness stated that any seasoned hunter recognizes that kind of silence. It often signals that a large predator has entered the area. A short time later, he heard a clicking sound off to his right. It repeated at intervals and seemed almost mechanical, not like anything he had heard in the woods before. The silence continued. He could not locate the source of the sound, and after roughly 20 minutes, a strong sense of unease set in. He finally stood up and made his way back to his truck. Sitting there afterward, he tried to process what had happened. Though he never actually saw the source of the clicking, he later came to suspect that a concealed being may have been nearby watching him, and perhaps choosing not to approach because he was armed. Indeed, folks, that is testament to basically another phenomena, the 411 folks, in which basically people go missing in state parks. Well, a lot of the time, basically, people report when they're armed. They might encounter some weird phenomena, sounds, or even laughter, but nothing approaches them because maybe it's wary of basically attacking or kidnapping a person who is armed, who would give it more resistance than they could possibly really deal with. That could be the case with our, witness here, folks. Now, very interesting. Now remember, I said I was only going to read one story. Well, guess what? I'm going to basically make this an extra long video and read the rest of the stories in that article, folks. So let's continue to the next one. A second witness reported a direct sighting in North Carolina in 1984 when she was 13 years old. She had gone to check the mailbox at the end of a long driveway and was walking back toward the house when an intense feeling of dread suddenly washed over her. Looking toward the tree line, she saw what she described as one of the Glimmerman, or predator invisible things, hiding there and watching her. The sight terrified her. She ran back to the house as fast as she could. Even years later, she remained adamant that the experience was real and not imagined. The fear of that encounter stayed with her into adulthood, and she stated plainly that she no longer goes into the woods because she knows she's not alone in them, folks. She knows there are other things in it now. She might have only saw a Glimmerman, but now she has to basically think to herself, could it be possible that there are other things out there? Things that most people scoff at? I definitely do believe that is the truth, folks. That there are things out in the woods, things in this world that no one can possibly explain. And this girl, she saw one of them. Now, could it be that this Glimmerman was a demon, an alien, or maybe an interdimensional interloper, folks, or an alien, even? We just can't be for sure. All we know is that the witness here is so terrified she refuses to go out in the woods alone. But let's read on. Another account came from Australia and dates back to the witness's childhood. His mother had been taken to the hospital with severe asthma, and while his father was outside collecting wood for the fire, he was alone in a bedroom, jumping on the bed. Through a crack between the hinges of the bedroom door, he could see into the kitchen, where the light illuminated the room just enough for him to make out shapes. That was when he noticed something standing behind the door near the bed. He described it not as an ordinary shadow, but as a black, glimmering mirage, a silhouette-like form that was clearly present and watching him. The sight filled him with immediate terror. He said the fear rose into his throat, freezing him in place. He kept focusing on the sliver of light through the door crack, almost unwilling to fully acknowledge what he was seeing. Then he heard his father's boots on the back step coming up the veranda, and the figure vanished. He insists that he was fully awake and remembers pretending not to see it, refusing to look directly at it again. He estimated that the entity stood as tall as the bedroom door. Indeed, folks, this is what he says he saw, and from the sounds of it, it sounds like it was 7 to 8 feet tall here, folks. At least 7, to be sure. So, that tracks with basically other cryptid entity encounters, particularly, invisible Bigfoot encounters, where the witness says that the entity, while they could not see them, they felt that indeed it was a Bigfoot. And that would track that it would be 7 to 8 feet tall, like other Bigfoot encounters here, folks. Now, I'm not saying that this entity was a Bigfoot, only that, like other encounters with pale crawlers, Bigfoot, and such, it was a tall, very tall entity. Let's just say that. Let's read on, folks. A fourth witness described an encounter that took place in 2018 while he was stationed at Edwards Air Force Base in California. At the time, he was awaiting retaining for a new Air Force specialty and had fallen into an unusual sleep pattern, resting in 2 separate 4-hour blocks each day. After waking around midnight, he would often walk from his dorm to the base gym for an intense workout, then return along a path that crossed a small patch of desert. One morning between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock a.m., after leaving the gym and stepping out into the, street facing his dorm building, he noticed a strange shimmering off to his left about 100 yards away. At first, he assumed it was some kind of light distortion from the nearby auto hobby shop, but when he stopped and focused on it, he realized he was looking at something else entirely, something he just could not explain at all, folks, something that looked to him like a man, but probably like the entity from the Predator movies, folks. Probably was what he could equate it to. Let's just say that. Let's move on now and read the rest of his story. He then saw what he described as a huge, translucent creature moving beneath a streetlight. It ran across the road at tremendous speed and disappeared into the dark desert beyond the gym. He said he had never run in fear like that before. The next day, after telling his roommates what he had seen and what had happened, he returned to the scene with one of them to recreate it. His friend ran the same route across the road, and though he was fast, the effort left him winded. The witness concluded that whatever he had seen was large, fast, and very real. He also stated that he had never heard the term Glimmerman until he searched online later that night, and found that other people indeed had encountered these things, folks. Things that most people, as I said, just laugh at and just disregard. But our witness here, a soldier, someone that most people would take, his account as credible, folks, he saw this being, and apparently, hopefully, his roommates also maybe basically believed him, or at least back up his story, folks, while they didn't say it directly. All he can say is that, his roommates maybe at least gave him an ear to his account, and maybe basically stated that his demeanor was very credible. He seemed like he was telling the truth. That alone, with what he, does professionally as a soldier, folks, gives his story a lot of credit, I would say. But then again, we don't know what his roommates said about his story, folks. They probably called him crazy. But I could say maybe there's a good chance here that they themselves thought he was telling the truth. Either way, I would imagine that maybe his roommates, they might have said they don't believe him, but maybe they kept an eye out for something strange going on at or around the base. He himself, he later learned that there was a phenomena known as the Glimmerman. He probably also read the stories, folks, and he probably wondered maybe what he saw could possibly have been maybe a test of some sort of top secret camouflage gear. Now, this would be the kind of place I would expect such a test to take place, folks, especially if they were outfitting maybe some soldiers with some sort of top secret camo gear like this, that they'd basically use it basically at the base or maybe in the surrounding desert near the base to test it out and basically see if anyone basically made out and saw this, this particular test subject, folks. Maybe our witness did see something like this, folks. Maybe it explains all the accounts of Glimmerman encounters, that what we're seeing is basically tests of some sort of top secret, maybe even reverse engineered alien technology confiscated by the American government and used in these tests by, the government. I mean, I would love to ask if this guy believed it was some sort of test he saw, folks. They basically thought, the government was behind it or not. Now, in the first story, folks, with basically this troll-like entity or ultra-terrestrial, I said that maybe this entity was normally invisible, but for whatever reason it made its presence known to the witness. T. I also thought that maybe it had to, because maybe it was weakening, and in an effort to hide its presence as a mythological creature like a troll or a dwarf, like the way the witness described this being here, folks. But then again, you would think the power to basically influence people's minds like this would basically be even more, power-consuming than basically making yourself invisible, right? Well, that's just my idea there, folks, and trying to explain the reasoning behind this entity's appearance to this, young man. T here. All I can say is that maybe what he saw was indeed something other than normal. Maybe it was an interdimensional interloper taking a form that would frighten this young man, because maybe this entity was feeding on fear. Remember, our witness said that he was frightened nearly completely out of his wits by the presence of this entity. All I can say is maybe there's some truth at that, folks. Now, with these Glimmermen, maybe there are similar phenomena. Maybe what is seen was some sort of interdimensional interlopers pressing themselves, inserting themselves, or any other way you want to basically describe it, into our reality. And the witnesses, they felt fear and other emotions, folks, and these entities fed on this fear and made themselves more real. All I can say, folks, is that basically with the fourth account, with the soldier here, the fact that he saw this entity on this, on this base, or at least nearby it, and it ran off into the desert, makes me think that indeed the theory that these entities are actually just, military personnel or soldiers involved in some sort of top secret experiment to basically test this top secret and highly experimental camouflage gear here, folks. Because I've heard the government is developing this sort of technology, and I know of one experiment that was basically done years ago, in which basically they're trying to basically make camo gear that basically projects an image of the background onto the front of the uniform of the soldiers who are wearing this gear, folks. So what the witness here could have been maybe the background projected onto the, surface of the uniform that he was seeing here, folks, making this blurry, almost predator-like, entity that basically he could mistake for basically literally the, monster from the Predator movies, folks, the alien and stuff like that. That's what he basically has to say about that. Getting back on track, though, anyone would basically, if they saw this camo gear in use, would basically mistake it for basically the Predator, folks. Maybe that's what the government is counting on. But is that true with all cases? We're seeing these cases all over the country, so could they possibly all be tests of this top secret gear, folks? A lot of people say that when they see UFOs, they think they're basically some sort of top secret aircraft the government's developing. In some cases, that is true, folks, but not in all cases, because it makes no sense. But that's my thinking here, folks, because I don't believe that every case of basically a UFO is just someone witnessing some sort of top secret aircraft. And the same goes with these Glimmermen. There's too many of them in too bizarre and basically separate places for them all to basically be just some sort of, military test of camo gear or something. But then again, I would say the least some of them could be. But now, folks, we're at the end, so please go, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics They're Bad For You. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions of the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications, folks. Hit the part of the bell that give you all future notifications. And please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video, so be sure to come back again then. Until next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.